Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Nore arrived at the tavern. Before stepping inside, she glanced over her shoulder. Part of her silently hoped the golden-haired elf had followed her, but the street behind her was empty. No glowing green eyes, no cloaked figure, nothing. She pushed open the door. The tavern fell quiet. Every eye turned toward her. Nore was used to it. No one trusted a woman who hid her face beneath a hood, especially not in a place like Halcyon. Her golden eyes swept over the room. Merchants, laborers, drunks. None of them held her attention. She climbed the stairs, and with every step the weight of those stairs lessened. At last, she could breathe without feeling watched. Then she saw it. A figure stood at the end of the hallway, illuminated by the flickering candlelight. Nore froze. Her hand drifted to her weapon. Slowly, she approached. "Show yourself," she said through gritted teeth. She couldn't die here. Not now. The fear growing inside her only sharpened her focus. She drew her dagger and crept closer. Then the figure stepped into the light. A cloak. Gold hair, green eyes. The same face she had seen in the alley. A shiver ran down her spine. Yet it wasn't fear she felt. It was relief, ignoring every instinct screaming at her. She lowered her dagger and slid it back into its sheath. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why did you follow me? How are you related to Maze?" The questions spilled from her lips one after another. The elf said nothing. Instead, he slowly lowered his hood. He was handsome, though weariness had carved itself into his features. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, as though he had neglected himself for days. His eyes seemed to glow in the dim light, but there was nothing threatening in them, only exhaustion. Finally, he spoke. "Can we talk in private?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant. For the first time, he met her gaze directly. Her heart stumbled. The feeling caught her completely off guard. Against her better judgment, she unlocked her door and gestured for him to enter. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. Her heartbeat quickened. She couldn't tell whether it was fear or something entirely different, so she raised her guard. "Why have you been following me?" She folded her arms and glared at him. The elf rubbed a hand over his chin. "I was told to find you." His eyes drifted over her, lingering for only a moment. Her pulse quickened again. The strange feeling returned, leaving her uneasy. "By who?" she asked sharply. Something hot stirred beneath her ribs. Anger, or perhaps fear. The elf looked back at her and frowned. "I was sent by Maze." Sorrow touched his voice. Everything inside her went cold. Then the anger erupted. "Get out." Her voice shook. The elf stood motionless. Conflict crossed his face. Shadows seemed to gather around him. For a long moment he simply looked at her. There was something pleading in his expression, as though he wanted to say more, as though leaving would wound him. Nore answered him with a hard glare. At last he looked away. Without a word he turned and left. The heavy door slammed shut behind him. The sound rattled through the room and deep into her bones. Her anger remained. With a frustrated cry, she drove her fist into the wooden wall. Pain blossomed across her knuckles. Slowly, the anger faded. "Why?" she whispered. "Why the hell does none of this make sense?" Silence answered her. The room suddenly felt unbearably small. Her heart still raced, and she couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her. That tired expression, those strange glowing eyes, the sorrow in his voice. She pressed a hand against her chest, forced the feelings down, buried them where they belonged. Eventually, the footsteps in the hallway faded, and the chatter downstairs grew quieter. Only then did she sink heavily onto the bed. Exhaustion washed over her like a tide. For the first time since arriving in Halcyon, she felt truly lost. Her mind and body felt heavy. She lay on her side, staring at the cold, empty hearth. The embers had long since died. Slipping a hand beneath her pillow, she felt the now familiar chill of the ornate necklace. She wrapped her fingers around it and squeezed, holding her eyes shut. Nothing happened. Disappointment settled over her. She began to open her eyes. Then the world fell away. Another dream. This one was different. The darkness that usually greeted her was gone. Instead, she felt warmth, comfort. A gentle breeze stirred around her, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh rain. And standing before her was Maze, not the broken woman on the executioner's block, not the ghostly figure from the alley. This was the Maze she remembered. Strong, radiant, alive. Nora was small again, barely 2 years old. Maze knelt before her, a soft smile upon her face, and held out a wooden knife, the same one Nora had treasured for years. Tiny hands reached for it. The warmth deepened. For a moment, everything felt safe. Then dread crept in, because she remembered this day. Maze had left soon afterward, traveling to a nearby town to gather supplies for the settlement. She had only meant to be gone for a few days, but the days became weeks, then months. Unease spread through the village like a sickness. Some prayed to the goddess for Maze's safe return, others whispered that even the strongest warrior could fall. Little by little, hope faded. The memory shifted. Nora could no longer remember Maze's face. It blurred, as though someone had smeared paint across a canvas. Desperate, she wandered the village, searching for anything that remained of her. Her feet carried her to Maze's home, abandoned, silent. Dust clung to the windows. Her tiny hands pushed against the splintering door. It creaked open. Everything inside remained untouched. A cloak draped over a chair, books upon a shelf, a half-finished carving resting on a table. It looked as though Maze had simply stepped outside and never returned. Nora wandered through the house carefully, afraid that touching anything might somehow erase the last traces of her. Then she found it. A painting. The only one left intact. She stared at it. Maze's hair seemed to shine in the narrow beams of sunlight peeking through the window, as though real gold had been woven into the canvas. Then her gaze drifted to the eyes, emerald green, bright, luminous. They seemed to shine even in the shadowed room. Nora slowly reached toward the painting and awoke. Her eyes opened to the dim light of dawn. She was calm. Strangely, wonderfully calm. For the first time in years, a dream had not left her trembling. She sat up in bed. The necklace was still clutched in her hand. As she opened her fingers, a tiny flicker of light pulsed from within the black stone. Nora blinked. Then it happened again. A faint glow. Her eyes widened with curiosity. "One day," she whispered, "I'll find that child again." Her fingers closed around the pendant, and thank her. The room fell silent once more. Slowly she climbed from the bed. Only then did she realize she was still wearing her hunter's clothes. She began to undress. As the layers fell away, the familiar scars emerged once more, some thin and white, others deep and jagged. She had carried them for so long that they almost felt heavier than her flesh. Crossing the room, she picked up the dress Risa had made. For a long moment she simply stared at it. Then she pulled it on. The bodice tightened around her ribs, forcing her into a posture that felt unnatural. The fabric was soft, comfortable even. Anyone else might have appreciated it. Nora only felt her earlier peace slipping away. Regret settled over her like a cloak. The dress felt heavy upon her shoulders, like a burden, like a set of chains, as though it expected her to bow. She combed her fingers through her hair, trying to make herself look presentable for her new employers. A few strands fell aside, revealing the marred remains of her ears. She immediately reached for the bandana, the cloth wrapped around her head, concealing her worst scars. As the fabric settled into place, she felt herself relax, safer, hidden. At last she was dressed. Nora drew a slow breath. Then she opened the door and began her descent into the tavern below, carrying with her the faint warmth of the dream and the cold weight of the necklace hidden in her palm. The moment Nora reached the bottom of the stairs, the chatter in the tavern died. Silence spread through the room. She felt every eye turn toward her. She kept walking, ignored the stairs, ignored the unease creeping beneath her skin. Sweat beaded along the back of her neck. Her short brown hair clung to her skin, making it itch. She didn't dare stop. She only knew one thing. She needed to get outside, now, before something happened, before she lost her nerve. At last, she reached the door. A hand suddenly wrapped around her arm. Cold, hard. Nora spun around. No one was there. The patrons had returned to their conversations as though nothing had happened. No one was looking at her. No one seemed to have moved at all. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Slowly, she looked down. Nothing. No hand. No one beside her. A chill crawled up her spine. She drew a shaky breath and stepped outside, leaving the tavern behind. The morning air did little to calm her. After a short walk, she found herself standing before the castle gates. The fortress loomed over the town like a great stone beast, its towers blotting out the sun. She crossed the courtyard and approached the entrance. A burly guard stepped in front of her. "State your name and your business with the king." His voice was rough, carrying the weariness of a man who had spent too many years standing watch. Nora inhaled slowly. Time to play her role. "I'm a new maid," she said, softening her voice. "I have a letter of recommendation." The guard studied her for a long moment. His eyes lingered on the bandana covering her ears. Then he stepped aside. Before she could pass, he spoke again. "Don't use the main entrance. There's a servant's door on the left side of the castle." Nora looked at him in surprise. "Thank you," she said, offering a strained smile. The guard merely grunted. She left him behind and made her way along the castle wall. The farther she walked, the colder the air seemed to become. She noticed the flowers first. Dead, their petals blackened and shriveled. Then the trees, their branches twisted and rotten, bark peeling away in long strips. A shiver passed through her. This place was wrong, unnatural. Death clung to the castle like a shadow, and at its center sat the king. At last she reached a heavy wooden door. A metal plaque had been bolted to it. Etched into its surface was a broom. How original, she thought. She reached for the handle. The door suddenly flew open. An elf woman rushed out, muttering to herself. They collided. The woman bounced off Nora and crashed to the ground. Nora stepped forward to help. Crunch. A sharp sound came from beneath her boot. The woman gasped. "No." She frantically patted the ground before her. Nora stepped back. Beneath her foot lay shattered glass set in a bent metal frame. Glasses. The woman's glasses. The elf reached toward them with trembling fingers. "My glasses!" she cried. As she gathered the broken pieces, a shard sliced open her finger. She hissed and immediately shoved the bleeding digit into her mouth. Nora quickly grabbed her wrist. "Don't do that." The words came out far louder than she intended. The woman froze. Then she looked up and began to cry. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why does this always happen to me?" Tears spilled from her earthy brown eyes. Nora stared at her in silence. She wasn't sure what to do. Crying people always made her uncomfortable. The woman continued to sob. Finally, Nora sighed and bent down to help her up. "What's your name?" She tried to sound kind. To her ears it sounded awkward and forced. The woman sniffed. I'm Hester." "Can you please let me go?" Hester asked softly, glancing at her arm. "It hurts." Nora blinked. She was still gripping her wrist. She released her immediately. "I'm sorry. I was only trying to help." Her voice trailed off. Now that she was standing, Nora got a better look at her. She wasn't a woman, she was a girl. Thin and small, perhaps only a few years younger than herself. The oversized servant's uniform hung from her frame, and her face looked perpetually exhausted. Something in Nora's chest tightened. A sudden, unfamiliar heaviness settled over her. The girl looked as though the world had already broken her, and for some reason, that hurt to see. Hester looked up at Nora, and at last, her tears began to subside. "You must be the new maid," she said with a sniffle. She wiped the blood from her hand onto the dark fabric of her uniform. Nora sighed softly, and reached for the girl's hand once more, this time more carefully. Hester met her halfway, allowing her small hand to rest in Nora's. "I can clean it up," Nora said, attempting to sound comforting. The words felt awkward on her tongue, but they seemed to work. A smile finally bloomed across Hester's face. "Yes, please," she said, squinting without her glasses. Nora glanced at the shattered frames on the ground before looking back at the girl. "Are you sure you're all right?" "It's okay." Hester gave a dry little laugh. "I've broken them before." "Do you have another pair?" "Nope." Her smile faltered for only a moment before returning. Nora's chest tightened. Together, they stepped through the door and into the room beyond. It was small and sparsely furnished. A few tables and chairs sat scattered about, and a cold hearth rested against one wall. A servant's common room, perhaps, or at least it had once been. Everything looked worn, used, tired, much like the girl beside her. Hester climbed onto one of the tables and sat atop it, swinging her legs back and forth while Nora searched the cupboards. After a moment, she found a small box of medical supplies. She returned and stood before the girl. "Hold still." Hester obediently offered her hand. Nora cleaned the cut as gently as she could. The girl winced but didn't pull away. Then she carefully wrapped the finger in a strip of cloth. As she finished tying the bandage, Hester suddenly spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." Nore paused. She slowly lifted her eyes. Hester was looking at her strangely. There it was again. That familiar expression. Pity. The same look people gave wounded animals. The same look Mimi sometimes wore when she thought Nore wasn't paying attention. For reasons she couldn't explain, she hated it. "Why?" Nore asked quietly. Hester's smile faded. The room seemed colder somehow. The girl lowered her gaze to the white bandage wrapped around her finger. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Because this castle eats people."